decided to go for a one-time show here on the stage for this purpose, the strategic estimate of the 2020 strategic assessment of the Institute published at the beginning of January. Well, as things go in the Middle East, so since it's been published, so many things have happened. I think we need to update it on a daily Knesset. The president just talked about it now. Benny Gantz talked about it yesterday, and it definitely spiked a lot of interest amongst the crowds I come from and the crowds you come from. But let me talk about something that is not included in it, the deal of the century. And you discussed it at length yesterday, but I would like to talk about it anyhow. And let me start with the ending point. Is to your assessment, is there any chances that anything from this deal will mature into some kind of an Israeli-Palestinian agreement? Well, first of all, the beauty of a strategic assessment is that it does not consider the 8 o'clock news and the most recent tweet. In the INSS, we try to look really further ahead, and the Trump plan, as you know, it's not new. It's been formulated over the past 3 years almost, and we have held meetings quite often with the team that had managed it. We gave them IDs. So that's why we're not surprised. Maybe the surprise was regarding the timing, but we were even a bit involved in that. We had suggested to this team to publish this plan in the first round of elections. Remember, back in spring of 2019, we had elections. We said that the right time to announce it is after elections and before the government. And then they rejected that. And the second time, Jason Greenblatt was in the Institute, and he said, your ID from April maybe will carry it out, execute it in September. They didn't do it, and now they decided to announce it before elections. And now I'd like to ask a question. Let's show slide number 4. Can you see four squares? Because I can't see from the stage. Okay. So I'd like to say peace between Israelis and the Palestinians. It's not something that this plan will achieve, because much more pro-Palestinian plans with parameters regarding borders and Jerusalem, which were much more positive towards the Palestinians, were rejected by them in Camp David 2000, and also with Olmert in 2008, and with Kerry in 2014. So there's no chance that this program will bring peace. So where are we going from here? And there are 3 options. One option is that this program will join all the others that I had mentioned in Reagan and Rogers and Clinton, and it'll be on the shelf for the benefit of historians who will maybe study it. And another option is that the Israeli Prime Minister has devoted some thought to it in the past 24 to 36 hours, and he'll say, okay, this is a deal. I'm going to take away only the things that are good for me, the annexation, and I'm going to implement it tomorrow morning. We thought that the Americans won't allow him to do that. For a minute, it seemed as if we were mistaken, but Kushner calmed us down already yesterday, and today it's crystal clear the Americans are not going to permit the option of a unilateral annexation to happen. So what do we recommend? We recommend the third alternative, and I believe that this is what's going to happen. There's a certain proposal here that could be an Israeli opening position, and on the other side, the Palestinian might come with their opening position. And if we have a different government here, we could place this program as a basis for negotiations. And you're asking me what's going to happen? I think that the Palestinians won't go for that either. So then what needs to be done is, together with a supportive, sympathetic president who sees the Israeli-Palestinian conflict from a perspective that's more Israeli, together with an Arab world that's no longer willing to allow the Palestinians to dictate to them what to do. And I hear from Arabs I meet quoting Abba Evan saying, you know, we're sick of the Palestinians never missing an opportunity to miss an opportunity. And I think that Israel, US, and the Arabs, they need to take this plan, but in a balanced way. balance with respect to what's being given to both sides and to start and implement it. If you remember, the INSS had published something similar to that 18 months ago. I think that it's the only plan in town. Look, we're living in some very odd times. All those who spoke against unilateral measures and against Palestinian state, and whoever spoke for peace objects to it today. At least this is what this is. It seems to be that this is the case in Israel in the past 36 hours. But let's say if Israel does execute some unilateral measures, and despite what you said about the Americans, it's still, an option. He said that yesterday, even the Ministry of Defense here. It reminds me a bit of that movie, Take the Money and Run. But anyhow, let's leave that to commentators. But I'm asking you, what will the Palestinians do? What will the Arab world do in such a situation? Whether it's our closest neighbor, Yarden, who are directly impacted by this. I think they got a bit scared, the Jordanians, when they heard that the U.S. is adding, that Israel is adding more forces at the border. They thought maybe we're going to start a war. Look, we always tend to place more focus on the military issue and the protests and terrorism. I think that the chances, of this main alternative, the risk is more of a political diplomatic one than a military one. Yes, there will be demonstrations. Yes, there will be a declaration that the security coordination will stop. But you know that the security coordination is the interest of the Palestinian Authority just as much as it's Israel's. The people of the PA remember very well what happens when Hamas takes over in a specific place. This security coordination not only protects Israel from terrorism, it protects the PA from a takeover by Hamas. They don't want to be thrown from the top of buildings in Ramallah as they did to them in Gaza. So I guess that there will be some demonstrations, but what I fear is not the demonstration itself, but rather something that will span out of control. The difference between a tactical event that nobody intended for it to happen and to evolve into a strategic one, once either Palestinian protesters are killed, or if there's an act of terror that hurts or harms Israelis, civilians, and soldiers, the cabinet today is less restrained than what we had seen in previous years. And perhaps this could take us to a bad place as a result of a tactical occurrence. Now, the Jordanians, there's a great difference between what they're saying and what they are really thinking. If Israel will control the Jordan Valley, it wouldn't really upset them. They prefer a border with Israel to a border with a Palestinian state, because God knows what kind of a country it will be, and maybe at a certain point it'll take over Jordan. But of course, they cannot say that. There will be protests. They'll take back their ambassador, and perhaps there will even be an element of freezing the peace accords. What concerns me more is the response of the rest of the world, because beyond President Trump, who's the president of the U.S. today, but perhaps not forever. There's a very large group in the U.S. that's called the Democratic Party that could regain power, and they don't like this main option. The word annexation there, it's more or less like, saying pig or swine in a synagogue. And our Jewish brothers in the U.S., most of them are Democratic. I think that it's a very bad measure, and there will be a European reaction to it, and in the UN, the U.S. can protect us, defend us when we're being attacked in the Security Council, but it cannot push forward annexations of the type that we will carry out. Maybe you'd like to say something about Gaza in this context or in general before we move on to the northern theater. Look, Gaza is a problem. There's nobody who wants to achieve actual peace with Israel there. It is dominated by a terrorist or ruled by a terror organization, and the most that they're willing to reach with us is an arrangement. But it's been very pragmatic recently, this terror organization. Okay, now let's see slide number 12. Look, there are two situations. That's on the right side, the red, that's war, and nobody wants to reach that, neither Israel nor Hamas. And that's good news. In today's world, in the 21st century, everybody understands that war is something that usually you get out of it in worse than you came into it. You can gain very little and you pay a lot. At best, you win the war, you conquer, but then all your problems begin, or you go back to square one. So Israel, which is very strong, and it can squash Hamas, and neither do Hamas. And Hamas is aware of the power balance. No party wants to go to war. Even the left wing, that hudna, that arrangement, that deep, long term, the parameters are very far when both sides talk to each other. They cannot seem to agree on the parameters, and this is why we are moving in these four situations. Perhaps a more narrow, restricted arrangement, nothing long term, and not that has some kind of recognition of agreements with the state of Israel, but rather an arrangement in which people are constantly waiting for after the elections to reach it, but we never reach after the elections. There's a ceasefire, and then we move to the brownish area where Hamas provokes us, and they're saying there's no agreement, and then they cross the line, and then there's a round or a campaign, and even in that campaign we don't go to war, and there are means to finish these campaigns much more quickly than we used to have. Maidanov will come to speak here later. The Egyptians won't be here, but they know how to finish these campaigns quickly. Okay, now let's finish discussing the Palestinian theater, because you discussed it at length yesterday and we don't have much time left. And mainly in this document, you talk about the main threat in Israel, and that is the northern theater, the northern arena. And I think that just a day or two before you submit this annual assessment to the president, the U.S. assassinates Qasem Soleimani in Iraq, and then you provide an immediate update, both orally and in writing. And exactly 4 weeks, I think, have passed since this killing. Can you maybe depict some kind of a picture of the day after Soleimani? Or somebody said something in the military, it's as if you hit a billiard table and the white ball hit, and now all the balls are scrambling all over the table and nobody knows which ball is where. Okay, let's look at slide number 5, please. Just in order to leave Gaza, I'm not going to talk about this slide, but you're welcome to look at it. The Iranians, they have two goals: to keep the regime in place and to achieve hegemony in the Middle East. Regarding both these goals, they're working both on the nuclear and the conventional spheres. But as for your question, both in the Intelligence Directorate and in our assessment was that we are entering 2020 in a situation in which the Iranians, with a lot of self-confidence, they attacked oil tankers. Nobody responded. They managed to decipher an American drone, and nobody responded. They attacked 50% of the export capacity of Saudi oil, and nothing happened. And it seems as if the Iranians are continuing to provoke the Americans, and they have the upper hand. The Americans in a separationist policy, and in this respect, Obama and Trump are not that different from each other. Both understand that oil is not that important to America, and both understand that the real problem of the U.S. is China, and they are narrowing their presence, their betrayal of the Kurds. All that gave this perception as if America was leaving and Iran is on the rise. And then Soleimani happened, and what Trump managed to do is to change the perception that America is willing to exert maximum political and diplomatic effort and nothing kinetic. And now this approach has changed, and now they are recalculating their route, the Americans. And because what happened beyond the killing of Soleimani, 50 people were killed in the funeral, and that showed everyone that they don't know how to control well enough inside. And they shot down the Ukrainian airplane with Iranians, and Canadians were also Iranians. And now this has shocked the regime. Has that changed the strategic strategic trend? I'm not sure. Will the U.S. continue to draw red lines for Iran and to respond to them? I think that until that happens, I remember Trump's first attack in Syria after the use of chemical weapons. It was in his first week in office, and it seemed as if now the policy would be changing, but then it didn't. So we change our assessment a little bit, but still, the fact that Iran feels that it's strong and that the U.S. is on its way out, we need to check whether this is not a strategic trend that will continue. And what effect will that have on the nuclear sphere, which is a dramatic sphere with a dramatic change in recent months, because now Iran is back in the field. It's enriching more than it's allowed to. She said that outright, and hasn't thrown out the supervisors. And you mentioned the Intel Directorate. If you were an Intel Directorate commander now, you would look at the Iranian nuclear project with much more scrutiny than we did in the past 4 or 5 years. Okay, slide number 6, please. We rehearsed on this at home. So there are 4 scenarios. No, he never saw the slides. There are 4 scenarios. 2 are depicted in pink, and that was the dream of the 4 Bs. Bibi, Bolton, Ben Salman, and Ben Zayed. They wanted one of 2 things to happen. Following the maximum pressure, either the regime will change or it will change its behavior, and that's what you see on the left, or that the Iranians will do something stupid and the Americans will attack them, their nuclear program. These 2 pink columns are a dream. I'm willing to, sign off on it, to join, but it's not going to happen. It's not happening. It's not happening. And we must prepare, and that's your question. We must prepare for the 2 following scenarios. 1, negotiations. We do not spy on the Americans, but we don't need to place microphones and wiretap the Oval Office because we read the president's tweets, and he wants negotiations. He says that outright, and the Iranians, they're not rushing to any negotiations. The supreme leader doesn't trust the Americans, doesn't believe the Americans. They didn't have a choice in 2013 to 2015 because the Iranian economy was about to collapse. He sent his friends to negotiate, and then he said to them, look, but I told you we shouldn't believe the Americans. So the Americans won't come until they understand the outcomes. The Iranis won't come until they understand the results of the next elections. And what's the red scenarios? The second one is a more dangerous one. And in this scenario, the Iranis are actually it's being carried out right now. They're saying, okay, you pulled out of the JCPOA, we'll also do the same, but we'll do so carefully because we're Iranians, we're smart, we're sophisticated. We're going to make a violation, 1 violation every 60 days. A violation every 60 days, and then we'll move ahead. Now I'd like you to show a slide I'm very proud of. That's slide number 7. And in this slide number 7, when Trump pulled out of the agreement in 2017, we said we must prepare to the fact that the Iranians will do something. And then in May 2018, when he canceled the waivers that he gave to several countries in Asia, South Korea and China and others to buy oil from Iran, they're going to respond now. Where? Look, this is the map. This map is from May 2019. It was created in the INSS. And now let's look at the right side, the nuclear side. They have 4 steps that they can carry out. First of all, violations of the agreement, and this is what they're doing. The other one is to completely pull out of the agreement. And the third one is to secede from the NPT, the Non-Proliferation Treaty. And the last one is to do what the North Koreans did, to opt for a bomb. And they are definitely entertaining this thought. They really want it, but they're very much afraid of the what will follow. And we, Israel and the US which has declared that it won't allow Iran to have a bomb, we need to decide what do we do when they cross our red line. And let me ask you a brief question, and please a short answer. Do you think that Israel needs to go 10 years back and prepare for a physical attack of Iran's nuclear facilities? I think that this option, we must have this option when the agreement was reached, and it was really denounced in Israel, and we kept saying that this agreement is problematic, but it's not disastrous. In its first 10 years, it's a pretty good, it's a not too bad deal. It kind of sets the Iranians back, and my dear friend, Chief of General Staff Gadi Eisenkot, that it happened when it was his watch. He knew how to move the IDF working point to a different place, and I believe that today the IDF is less prepared than it was in the past to attack in Iran. We have to be prepared to do that. Of course, it's the very last resort. Before we choose to attack, we can achieve a better deal. We can change the regime. We can use other options that are not attack, what I call option C, clandestine, cover, cyber. But if ultimately the choice is between an Iranian bomb and Israel attacking them, we better have that option. Okay, another topic which you discuss as an option here for an Israeli preemptive is the Hezbollah precision project, and here you say very, very clear things. You specifically say clear things. Israel needs to be prepared for an option that this year in 2020 it will have to attack in Lebanon, and with all the implications. Okay, slide number 11 please. The Hezbollah precision project is a significant one. It is a serious threat on Israel. These statistical fire, rockets and missiles that would hit the target 2 kilometers to the left or to the right, half a kilometer, and you couldn't achieve precision with them. They were weapons of terrorism. You can launch it towards Tel Aviv, and it doesn't matter if it hits Hayarkon Street or Evan Gvirol Street, but if somebody wants to target the main force components of Israel, the various underground piers for the Air Force aircrafts and the general staff buildings at the Kiryat, the reading power plant, for that you need a GPS precision, just like what you have in your car, a precision of 5 to 10 meters. When there's a great number of these missiles, the threat over the state of Israel is intensified. It is taken to if you want to take it to the extreme, you could even say that this is an existential threat. The state of Israel, without electricity, without an air force, without any intelligence, that's an existential threat. And an interesting question to discuss is if such a threat will be realized. We will hear later from Major General Khaliva to give a concluding address to this conference, and he will tell us how many missiles they have and if they have. But when we're talking about hundreds and thousands of missiles, now it becomes a serious problem. Why? Because there are 4 strategies to deal with this threat. Let's start with the bottom left one. Delay, disrupt. That's exactly the campaign between the wars that was led by Major General Eisenkot and Lieutenant General Eisenkot, and the plan for Soleimani is to have an X number of precise missiles, and thanks to the activities of the IDF in recent years, they have much less than that. The question is, did the campaign between the wars exhaust itself? Is Hezbollah indeed nearing the number they wanted? Have the precise missiles been transferred from Syria to Lebanon and Iraq? This question is an important one. It is an intel question. We're not going to discuss it here, but it definitely intensifies the threat, and then we need to switch to other strategies. 2 very legitimate strategies appear in green here, and that is deterrence and defense. What's the problem with deterrence? when the enemy has thousands or sufficient amounts in order to target whatever is deterring them. Because what's deterring Hezbollah? What we did to them back in 2006 at the Dahya neighborhood. And who did that? The Air Force. And they don't want that to happen again. But if they can somehow stop any activity of the Air Force, then we lose our deterrence strategy. And if deterrence doesn't work, and the missile defense, that we are the only country in the world that has an excellent combat proven operational system. But this system is very expensive. It's very expensive, and it can be penetrated if they use very high numbers. And then only one thing is left, and that is the very difficult decision in a world that doesn't like measures that are preventive strikes or wars. And if given, no, there's no exclamation mark here, but there's a request to discuss this. I claim that we do not discuss the key issues, and perhaps this will be my concluding comment. Let's look at slide number 2, please. There are 8 significant issues of gravity that had our government been preoccupied with governing and not with election campaigning, and then it would have had to discuss this. These are the issues, and we devised the strategy, the model. That's what we did, but the parameters should be infused by the intel organizations and the various operational entities, and ultimately this cabinet should discuss what Israel should do when elections sometimes come to an end. Maybe we'll discuss that in 2030 or 2040. Thank you very much.